Well, NC State's Cinderella run came to an end in the Final Four. But what will be the lasting impact?
You are Locked On ACC, your daily podcast on the Atlantic Coast Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Shout out to the everydayers for making Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am Alex Donno from Locked On Canes. He's Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack. And what a valuable resource Kenton has been to everybody during these great NC State runs, both men's and women's. They come to an end in the Final Four. NC State men's team falls 63-50 to Purdue, who punches their ticket to the final game. UConn, not surprisingly, punched their ticket later that night. But Kenton, I think about what the lasting impact could be here, both from the micro perspective of NC State and from the macro for the ACC. Also in this episode, we will talk some football because Clemson and NC State had their football spring games on Saturday, and the next 2 weeks is just going to be a palooza of ACC spring games left and right. We'll preview some of those. Now, from a conference standpoint with the Wolfpack, Kenton, to me, it's always a positive development when an ACC conference that we felt was underrepresented in the NCAA tournament, only getting 5 teams in. Same deal last year. And in both years, you get a team get all the way to the Final Four. It was Miami last year, my Hurricanes, your Wolfpack get it done this year. And it's also good to show you that, you know, in a league where even if they didn't get the respect on Selection Sunday, we come to find out that a team like NC State, who ended up a double-digit seed and only got in because they won 5 games in 5 days in the ACC tournament, the type of grind you get with that Atlantic Coast Conference schedule is going to prepare you for the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the other thing here is one thing that we know, ACC fans don't have ACC pride. That's not
right. They're not like the SEC fans. They have most of that.
Yeah, that's not a thing. ACC fans do not have ACC pride. But what we do have is we will unify over a good troll. And John Rothstein, Joe Lenardi and company, they provided us excellent troll material this entire run. Oh, the ACC is a top-heavy conference. That's why they don't deserve the love. Well, let me ask you this. There were 3 ACC teams in the Elite Eight, if I do recall correct, right?
Yes.
Okay. And of those 3 teams, how many got the double bye in the ACC tournament?
None, right?
1, Duke. Duke was the only team.
Duke, yeah. Right.
Duke was the only team out of the 3 that were in the Elite Eight to get a double bye. And here's the fun part about that. The way that the brackets shook out, either way that NC State Duke game went, there was going to be an ACC team in the Final Four.
Right. Yeah.
So in a conference that's so top heavy, in a conference that nobody matters outside of UNC and Duke. And look at that. There was a school from the Triangle in the Final Four all along, just like everybody had predicted. Just like everybody knew from the beginning of the tournament.
Well, and the Big 12 was the glamour conference in basketball this year, and they were awful in the NCAA tournament. So that's why we play the games.
You don't say. You don't say. You're telling me that Texas A&M University Commerce doesn't prepare you for the NCAA tournament?
Iron sharpens iron in the non-conference.
Well, what is plastic sharpen? You know, what is very dull plastic sharpen? Because we need to
rubber. Plastic sharpens rubber.
There we go. So the Big 12 was rubber, okay? And I guess during the tournament time, it was ice cold because those boys cracked under pressure with the slightest tap. This was embarrassing for them. But again, it's the Big 12 where everything is magical and they're okay and they're not going through any problems. They're not going through any losses. It's just us losers over here at the ACC who, again, happen to continue to whoop the wheels off the Big 12 every time. You know, this NC State team that we're talking about now, I believe their first round matchup was against some team from Lubbock, Northern Texas. They got really funny accents. Always sounds like they know something. The Red Raiders, Texas Tech Red Raiders. And what
conference? Is that right? They always sound like they know something.
Oh, if you've ever been to Texas, trust me, that North Texas accent always like ends upward when they're done talking like this. Yeah, it's kind of like Do you know? I know. Do you know, Donno? It's that type of deal. So, and pardon me for that terrible accent. I'm from Detroit, baby. I can't help it. But with that in mind, the reality is very simple. When the games that matter the most happen, I can understand if NC State were a one-off. But like you said, the year before that, it was your Canes. The year before that, both UNC and Duke made it. I mean, how many times, as the old saying goes, fool me one time, shame on you. Fool me twice, hey, shame on me. Fool me 3 times, can't get fooled again, as our former president said there. So, that's what we're looking at here, a situation where the ACC continues to fool. It continues to astonish, despite this being a year-over-year occurrence, and despite none of these pundits ever just saying, you know what, we were kind of wrong. We got it wrong. These teams are better than we thought. Instead, they just the metrics say that they were not good. And just because your teams were good every year for 4 to 5 years straight for 3 weeks, 3 particular weeks, and it's so interesting that those are the 3 weeks where the best of everybody's conference gets together, it doesn't change anything. And it's just like, man, if you all double down like this in your relationships, I'd hate to see how your wives handle this at home.
Oh, I haven't won. I'm happily married over 12 years. Haven't won an argument in over 12 years. Not a coincidence.
But you know what though? I really do think that it is such an ego thing, because you go in not with a question, you go in with an answer and a narrative, and you need whatever happens to fit that answer and narrative. When I come and do this show every day, I don't come on here to say, this is what I think in terms of this is what I believe, and I need to find facts that support it. The facts that I look at form my opinion. I thought Cade Klubnik was the second coming. I thought that he was the next one up in the Clemson line. I said, oh, he didn't look good in his first game ever, but that was a one-off, and that was a bowl. It was a little bit different of a situation. He'll be all right come next year. He'll be back. He's proven me wrong. I accept that. I accept that. I don't walk in with, well, Cade is good, so I'm going to find a way to make him good regardless of whatever happens. Same thing with NC State. I don't look at them and say, I feel this way about him, so I'm going to fight and claw and scrap to have this opinion. You've got to let the facts dictate how you feel about it. And the facts dictate that this Final Four run was stuff of legend from the men's team. From the women's team, it was a little bit more predictable, because they were the team that finished with the most ranked wins in the country. So despite being a 3 seed and kind of stumbling down the stretch a little bit, it wasn't inconceivable to see them getting to the Final Four. As soon as their bracket came out, I knew they were going. I knew right away. I said, yeah, that team's going. That team, Texas can't compete with them. Stanford can't compete with them. They're going. And lo and behold, they win. But this men's team, this is the stuff that stretches beyond basketball. This is the stuff that gives you hope for the downtrodden, gives you hope for the castaways, the ones that weren't picked first, the ones that aren't seen as that group, the ones that are constantly denigrated, constantly the bridesmaid, never the bride. That team, 5 wins in 5 days, and then to go on to get 4 more after that, where the competition got gradually tougher each game, that's the type of stuff that stretches beyond sports. That's life. That's life right there. And that's saying, as long as you show up, as long as you are willing to believe that you can do it, it's that old Henry Ford quote. The man that believes he can't and the man that thinks he can, they both have something in common. He's very likely right.
Well, I do want to talk about how the game played out when we come back. And I also want to talk about how a couple of spring games played out. Because, again, spring games, glorified practices in football, I get that. But you do see certain trends, especially when you see certain Clemson quarterbacks not seeming to play well in consecutive spring games. So we'll get to all that and so much more. Locked on ACC. You want to keep it locked. We're only getting started. And if you're a small business owner, you're only getting started with LinkedIn Jobs. Guys, when you're hiring, you want to find quality professionals that are right for your role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has all the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does all that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. 2.5 million small businesses are using LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Thank you so much for making this Monday episode of Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch today. We're free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hey, are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And, you were talking, Kenton, about how, sometimes we get things wrong. I did have a hard time seeing NC State winning the game outright against Purdue, but I thought they would be within double digits. I thought they would cover the spread. They didn't quite do that. There was a lot of DJ Horn and not enough of anybody else. Kenton, he ended up with 20 points and had a great stretch. Overall, and this includes their work on DJ Burns, but overall, Purdue defensively clamped down so much in the second half. NC State only scored 20 points in the second half of that ballgame. That's not going to be good enough to close out a Final Four.
Yeah, and the big thing here is we saw shades of the can't get right teams from earlier. NC State defensively did more than enough. If you hold one of the nation's best scoring teams to 63 points, you should be able to win that game. You should be able to walk away from that game a winner. They weren't able to because the shots just didn't fall. And like you said, too much DJ Horn, not enough anybody else. That's, that had been a story for NC State for many points in time during the year. Credit to Purdue. I specifically said, if you make everybody else from that team beat you but Edey, and they win, right, you tip your cap and you move on. And guess what? You tip your cap. Hey, they showed up. They were the 40% three-point shooting team that they've been throughout the year, and you move on. And so, best of luck to them going forward. But the actual game, I think the story of the game was Michael O'Connell going down and kind of seeing what that offense looked like without a true floor general, without somebody to truly set it up, control the pace, all those types of things that were immeasurably valuable for NC State throughout this run. Because if you look back at the first game, the game against Louisville, DJ Horn was out with a lower body injury. And he was coming off the bench for the next 2 or 3 games in the ACC tournament. But Michael O'Connell was there to, again, just be that steady guiding hand. Was he a 20-point-a-game guy? No, but he was steady, and he knocked down big shots. That's – if you have the other guys showing up and stepping up, sometimes that's all you need. And when Michael O'Connell went down, this team was in trouble. And, again, I'm not saying Purdue did not win this, and if Michael O'Connell was healthy, NC State would still be playing. So don't take it for me saying that. But I am saying it became a lot tougher of a task to score when you're a setup guy, when your playmaker is out.
Yeah, because some of the things that Purdue did do well, and like you said, like they earned the victory, and Matt Painter talked about it afterwards, that they had to win a game that was a little bit ugly at times. I thought NC State, they obviously did a good job containing Zach Edey's offensive stats. He scored half the amount of points he had scored in the previous game. He was held to 20 points, but I thought he really played unselfish, Kenton. His passing was on point. And, he draws so much attention. Like, when you have Edey on your team, you're able to guard DJ Burns one-on-one and make it difficult for everyone else. North Carolina State couldn't do the same things with Edey. So he was able to find opponents for a lot of open threes. And the Boilermakers did shoot 40% from 3, which was a big part of their success. But even in a game where Edey doesn't, flash the 40-16 type of numbers that we've seen him put up. Well, the 40 was a career high, but he had been close to it before. But even in games where he doesn't flash quite that much, he still does make the right basketball plays to get his teammates going, and he's really difficult to deal with.
And think about this. NC State was down 6 at half, and they, come out and they keep it close. They go on a very long run where they held Purdue scoreless for, I want to say, like 4 or 5 minutes. The problem was they also didn't score. That was the problem, right? So, again, offensively, credit to Purdue's defense, credit to, Painter and company. They did a great job. But The reality is NC State just didn't hit their shots, and we all know basketball is a make or miss game. Anything can happen. If you're talking one game, make or miss. Purdue is the better team. Purdue showed who they were all year. NC State had regressed into that team that we saw earlier in the year that had can't get right-itis, where only one side of the ball shows up. And on this night, it was the defense that showed up. But, you're not going to beat a top-seeded team with only one side of the ball showing up.
Yeah. Let's talk about the lasting impact from an NC State point of view. Now, as a Miami fan, someone who covers the team, I saw the Hurricanes get to the Final Four last year. They did a very poor job following that up, as we all saw, not qualifying for the NCAA tournament, getting bounced in the first round of the ACC tournament. I still think that things could go okay for Miami when it comes to the long term, because that Final Four run even 2 years ago helped with recruiting to get a McDonald's All-American like Jaleel Bethea locked in. So there are long-term effects from that. NC State are going to be losing the DJs, Burns, and Horn will not be back next year. But do you think NC State can be in a position where they can find more immediate and sustained success after a Final Four run?
Absolutely, and for a multitude of reasons. This NC State run was unique for a lot of reasons. One of the biggest reasons, the leading scorer from the team is from the city that the team is in. Think about that for a second. DJ Horn is a Raleigh native. And he did not originally get the offer out of college, took the long way around, found his way to NC State. Now, I want you to think about this. North Carolina is known as the hoop state. High school basketball is a very strong part of North Carolina's culture as a state. Some of the best basketball talent in the nation is produced here. And they just saw neither of the Blues, but NC State go to the Final Four. And not just for the men, for the women as well. And so when you see players that have questions of, can he really win? Imagine if Rob Dillingham was coming out this year instead of last year. You think he still goes to Kentucky?
Nope. I don't think
Interesting how that would have worked out. But things happen as they do. If ifs and buts were berries and nuts, squirrels will never starve. But going forward, we are looking at a situation where, and I've talked about this before with Roy Williams and Coach K retiring, there was a window that I thought was closed for NC State to re-usher in itself as one of the preeminent powers in college basketball. And did this one run do that on its own? No, but it is a hell of a start. If we look back 15 years from now, and NC State is on that track, and they've got multiple national championships, multiple Final Four appearances, a trip to the Sweet 16 is an embarrassment for some NC State teams. If we look back in 15 years and that's the case, we will not look further than this moment as the definer to say, Kevin Keats was this close to getting fired. And then all of a sudden, McNeely misses a free throw, O'Connell hits a three, and now boom. Right? That window that I thought had been closed, because I'm like, man, Shire keeps getting number one class after number one class. And, Hubert Davis has found his way to a national championship game as well. These are two very good coaches. All of a sudden, that window seems to not be as closed as it was the other day. So, this could have a very long-lasting impact for NC State. And I have under good authority that this transitions sports as well, because there are some football recruits who their concerns about NC State were their ability to win. And I'm talking high-level guys that, normally North Carolina's best guys, they have to go elsewhere to win championships. I have, under very good word, if NC State football can find a way to carry this momentum and do good things in their season, the perception of NC State is not what it used to be. And I'll just leave it at that.
Well, you already stole my guy, CJ Bailey, quarterback formerly from Chaminade Madonna down here. He's Jeremiah Smith and Josiah Trader's quarterback over there. Miami got into it too late for him, and
Miami pushed him to us. They said, we don't want the kid.
They didn't want him until it was like too late for him to feel wanted, unfortunately.
Yeah. And it's a like you said, he's, we're going to talk about him a little later, but it's one of those moments where you start looking and you start getting these things as snowball. You talk about the one thing affecting another, affecting another, affecting another. 2 teams going to the Final Four in the same year. I've never heard that hurting a program. Never heard of it.
Well, when we come back, not only did NC State have their spring football game, so did Clemson. And there was a lot to like from the Clemson Tigers, specifically on defense. But in there being a lot to like, I'm not sure if their starting quarterback was one of those things. So you want to keep it locked right here on Locked On ACC. Thank you so much for making this episode of Locked On ACC your first listen and your first watch today. Shout out to the everydayers. Locked On ACC is part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Since we were just talking about NC State, Kenton, let's start with the Clemson Tigers. As you know, not surprised this happened because Clemson always very good defense, very good defensive line. Specifically, the defense dominated the day for the Tigers in their spring game. But I'm watching their quarterback, their starting quarterback, Cade Klubnik, and he didn't really look like he's shown a lot of development coming out of last season. And again, I don't want to sound the alarms after a spring game, but I was really not impressed.
You may not want to sound the alarms, but in the words of one Patrick Starr, wee woo, wee woo, wee woo, the alarm should be sounding. Cade Klubnik has proven who he is at this point. And his struggles in the spring game should not surprise anybody. I mean, at this point, you know who he is. If you're expecting him to have a breakout season, that's on you, player. That's on you. You know what I've heard constantly of a sophomore slump? I've never heard of a sophomore jump. Never heard of it. Yeah. And so these teams now have a year of tape to see what you like doing, what concepts you like, what concepts you throw the best, all that type of stuff. They now have that on Cade Klubnik, and we're expecting him to get better because of what? Don't get me wrong. That's
he was really good in high school. That's not the only argument they have going for themselves now.
Oh, and that's so interesting. Oh boy, he was really good in high school. If only that was a predictor of who would be good in college. I'll tell you what. I mean, no offense, Donno, but your Miami Hurricanes would have won about what 50 national championships by now if good in high school was the barometer.
50 in 50 years, yeah.
You have to get on the field and you have to show what all of that meant, all of those rankings and all that, they must align with your play. And it's just not. It's just, it hasn't been there. Now, could there be a come to Jesus or find a religion moment for him where that magical light cuts on and he strings it all together? Possibly. I don't see it happening. I don't think he's the guy from any standpoint. From a pure talent standpoint, I have not seen him make a play where I'm just like, oh, okay, I get it. He may not be there yet, but I get it. From a decision-making standpoint, anybody who's listening to me talk about Cade Klubnik's decision-making, you know how I feel about it. But for those of you who haven't, I would not trust that young man to think his way out of a paper bag. No. That said, open here. Okay? I would not trust him to think his way out of it. So, and intangibles, where you just talk about that it factor, where like, he just makes it work. You don't know why. You don't know what happens. He just makes it work. He doesn't have that either. I haven't seen that thing in him where I'm like, in winning time, you don't bet against Cade. He may not be the biggest, the fastest, the strongest, the this is, the that is, but in winning time, he just always ends up on top. He doesn't have that either. So at this point, I'm asking, right? And I know that all the Clemson fans are going to say, oh, you all are just upset because we're leaving your podunk backwood conference, and that's fine. I'm fine with that. But I'm asking, and I want somebody to give me some compelling evidence. When you call us stupid, please just tell us what you've seen from Cade to indicate that there is a big breakout coming next year. That's all I ask.
I think a lot of Clemson fans agree with you just based on some of the comments that Clemson fans were making at, because I was watching the game online and I had like this live chat of Clemson they were complaining about Cade the whole time. And I agree with a lot of these comments, not to say that he'd be the better option right now, but in terms of the future, I thought Trent Pierman, freshman quarterback, had just overall a better outing, probably showed more upside, at least for the future, as far as that goes. But, you know, I will emphasize Clemson's defense played really well. They had 14 tackles for loss, 9 sacks in the spring game. Now, it's spring game, so a lot of those are the play gets blown dead. Maybe a quarterback could have escaped it in certain situations. They had a pick 6 in the game. So it was a good performance by the defense. And I think Clemson, they're going to be a good team this year. But the thing is, I just don't necessarily favor them to be ACC champions. And that was, I went on the Locked On College Football show with Spencer McLaughlin few days ago, Kenton, and he's a little higher on Clemson than I am, because like for his formula, you get a team that returns the triumvirate of the head coach and the offensive coordinator and the starting quarterback. He likes the consistency. I think he thinks Clemson's going to be, and they were okay last year, but he thinks they're going to be even better than they were last season. I think Florida State, they're my ACC champs until proven otherwise. And I hope nobody clips that, because I'm a Miami guy, but it's just that's just the way that I see it right now. But I mean, where do you put Clemson in that pecking order, Kenton?
I would say that Clemson is a 2A, 2B, maybe 3, however you want to put it, type of situation. Honestly and truly, at the top, there's so much volatility.
Yeah.
That we all are pretending to know. None of us know. None of us know. You know what I mean? Like, we can all pretend, oh yeah, DJU is going to look great, and their receivers are going to look great. They're bringing in lots of talent at Florida State. They're going to look great. It may work out. It may not. Who knows? How long did it take Jordan Travis to get fully adjusted?
Yeah, a few years. Yeah.
And we're counting on DJ to go at year one. Now, the thing I will say about DJ is, of all the transfer quarterbacks in the ACC, I'd probably say he has the highest floor.
Yeah,
He's the guy.
Good way to look at it.
Yeah. Playing his worst ball, I think, is better than Kyle McCord's worst ball, right? I think that's definitely a situation there. But the problem is he has one of the lower ceilings as well. Like, I don't see DJ having Heisman moments.
No.
And what's the problem with that? If you look back at Florida State last year, Jordan Travis had multiple Heisman moments. He had multiple moments where you look back, you're like, oh my God, man, that boy looks special. You're not sure that you're going to get that same thing from DJ. So you've got questions there. And with Clemson, we just talked about NC State basketball and defense showing up at the offense. Well, it's not enough. It's not enough. I'm sorry to tell you. I'd love to believe, I'm a defensive guy, I'd love to believe that you could win with just great defense. I'd love to believe it. You need more. Do you trust Clemson's running game to get you to 11, 12 wins?
No.
Do you trust to get you to 10?
9, maybe.
That's what I'm saying. And is 9 good enough to get you to the conference championship?
No.
I'd say no.
Probably
I'd
not.
say no. You want to say, well, NC State could do it, but NC State has never done it. NC State has flatly never done it. That's just what you're looking at there. So now you're asking yourself, who even has the wherewithal to get it done? You talk about Syracuse and how well Fran is doing it in recruiting. Kyle McCord is your starting quarterback, period. Until he shows me that he's an entirely changed man. And we could go down the line for all the teams in the ACC, but I see more teams with big questions than I see teams with big answers. And so that's why I say, if you ask me where Clemson fits in, I think that about 1 through 3 are all like, they're jockeying for position. And you could say, well, the tie goes to the legacy team, the team that won it last year in Florida State. But again, a lot of questions.
Yeah,
a lot of questions about a lot of new faces, a lot of questions about even your old faces. Why was your DN Patrick in the portal? Yeah. Why did your linebacker Lundy go get in the portal? What is going on over there? What's happening?
Well, I think a lot of it had to do with NIL, with wondering how come guys that are transferring in are getting better deals than I have now, and it's one of the realities that comes with this era of college football.
And do you not think that of all the things that could potentially tear apart a locker room,
NIL, definitely,
that being one of your 2 stars being looked at as like, hey, he didn't really want to be here. And that same problem goes to Miami, because Cam Ward said that he wasn't coming. He was going to the NFL.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? So every team at the top of the ACC, there are big questions. I'm not seeing big answers. I'd love to see teams pop out with big answers, but we're not going to get that till we put the ball down and start playing some football here.
Yeah, I was watching some of NC State's spring football game as well. I thought Grayson McCall looked pretty good. He missed on a few throws, but overall, I think he's going to be fine. He's going to be good there. But again, like talking about quarterbacks of the future, I mentioned CJ Bailey out of one of the most prominent high schools in South Florida. He had some really good plays, Kenton. 67-yard run. He had a 23-yard pass to Wesley Grimes for a touchdown. And, we're talking about an early enrollee freshman. I'm going to be watching a lot more of these spring games because we've got 5 13, 14 of them still to come from the ACC. But I liked what I saw from CJ Bailey.
I want to thank Mario Cristobal personally. I don't know who's more happy with Mario Cristobal, Georgia Tech fans or me. I just don't know. I don't know. Because
still probably Georgia Tech fans.
Because, well, here's the thing. Him not kneeling against Georgia Tech cost him one game. Him letting CJ Bailey get up out of there, who knows how
we'll
many
see.
that.
I mean, so basically, Miami has another quarterback in the class who they recruited first and prioritized. This guy Judd Anderson, who's 6'7". He's got a strong arm. So I've liked. He doesn't have quite like the athleticism that CJ has, but I've got an open mind, and I like Judd. Seems to have a good head on his shoulders. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Well, here's what I mean by that. Not necessarily that Miami doesn't have a quarterback and it's going to cost them games. I mean, think of the amount of games that NC State may have just won because you let CJ Bailey get out of South Florida.
Yeah.
How far is Chaminade from Miami's campus?
Probably 30 miles or not even, maybe not even like 25, 30 miles, something like that.
So a 45-minute drive.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mario. Thank you. I am telling you right now, NC State's skill position showed me something. That room, again, no disrespect to the guys from last year, it was devoid of talent. This year, Wesley Grimes, every time you saw him, defenders were looking at the back of his head like good barbers. He was gone. He was gone. They were trying to line him up, and he was gone, okay? You talk about Noah Rogers. Noah Rogers is going to know an end zone. He's going to know a touchdown. He's going to know a few postseason awards if he plays during the season, how he looked during the spring game. And I'll tell you, the biggest thing that really stood out to me is, like you talked about with CJ Bailey, it's the depth. It's multiple guys getting it done, not just the older guys. CJ Bailey did his thing, but even Lex Thomas, right? For those of you who don't know, Drake Thomas, Thayer Thomas are the big brothers of Lex Thomas. Now, of course, Drake was supposed to be good. He was highly taught and all that. Thayer is some skinny walk-on from baseball. What is he doing on the field? Now he's all up in NC State's record books. And Lex, of course, 90-some-odd yard touchdown to Wesley Grimes, who's a guy that he knew before they came to NC State. I'm telling you what, this NC State team is scared. The problem is for them, like I have talked about with the basketball team, they have had can't get right-itis in the past. And they need to truly tell themselves, Russell Wilson ain't walking through that door. Mike Lennon ain't walking through that door. Tom O'Brien ain't walking through that door. None of those guys are walking through that door. This ain't the old school. This ain't, with Phillip Rivers. This ain't chuck them out. This is us. And we have to believe, not just that we can go to a championship, we can win it. We can win it because the pieces are there. You have a cornerback that hasn't allowed a touchdown in, nearly 3 years in Aiden White? One of the most underrated players, not just corners, one of the most underrated players in the country. He got an interception up off Miami in cover 4 by letting his receiver get behind him.
Thanks, Tyler Van Dyke.
That's the type of calculated risk. If you take it, you got to make it thing that separates like he's a guy and he's the guy. Aiden White is the guy. The linebacker core left something to be desired in this game. I was a little concerned about them, but I'm sure Tony Gibson is going to get that together and correct it. This team can be special. To me, the biggest concerns, linebacker core, offensive line, and I'm a big believer that the big boys are what determine your season. If this offensive line can hold up and do good things, they'll be just fine. And like I said, I have on very good authority from some very good players in the state of North Carolina. If NC State can show that they're a winner, certain players who are very highly touted that don't have NC State on the radar right now, they jump up in those talks because, of course, everybody wants to stay home if you can. And, if you can stay home and win and end up in the playoff and get NIL deals that are $500,000, $1 million, whatever, who's not going to take that, right? That's taking candy from a baby. So, these spring games are telling us something. They're telling us a good look at the picture, but there's still so much to be discovered.
And there are 12 spring games left to be played in the ACC. Tomorrow, we'll talk about which ones have the most significance. He's Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack. I'm Alex Donno from Locked On Canes. We'll talk to you again next time on another episode of Locked On ACC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.